Test 1, 2, 3.
Test. Test 1, 2, 3. Test. Test. Test.
Good morning, everyone. I think we can start, so if you could please take your seats. Welcome to the Southeastern European Dialogue on Internet Governance, or SEEDIG. My name is Sorina Teleanu. I work for the Romanian Parliament, but now I'm speaking as a member of the organizing committee of SEEDIG. And in order to start, I would like to invite Mr. Valeriy Borisov, Deputy Minister for Transport, Information Technology and Communications of Bulgaria. Please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, dear friends. It's a great pleasure to welcome you, the participants from all over Europe, to the 8th edition of the European Dialogue on Internet Governance, which Bulgaria has the honor to host. As an open platform for informal discussions, the European Dialogue on Internet Governance is a result of the common efforts of a number of NGOs, institutions, and individuals who contribute to its organization. The Internet and digital technologies transform our life, the way we work as individuals, in business, and in our communities. They promote innovation, growth, trade, democracy, and human rights. Internet as a global resource needs global governance. The fast, open, and secure Internet, including the Internet of Things, is one of the most fundamental enablers of data-driven economy and an essential tool for achieving the digital single market. In order to achieve it, we need reliable, trustworthy, high-speed, affordable networks and services. Such a process is directly related also to protection of the fundamental rights of consumers, privacy, and personal data protection, as well as to encouraging innovation. In such a way, the European business and citizens will enjoy the full advantage of innovations such as cloud computing, big data, and Internet of Things. In the framework of the recently adopted digital single market strategy for Europe, the European Commission and the member states will work to develop a sustainable approach to Internet governance through the multi-stakeholder model aimed at keeping the Internet free and open. Republic of Bulgaria stands up for the fundamental principles in building and developing the Internet as a global strategic resource in terms of transparency, freedom of expression and access, security and technological neutrality, protection from harmful content, management and governance, flexibility, fragmentation prevention. Bulgaria is actively developing all aspects of Internet, from its management to network and information security. Our strategic goals show the intention of achieving ultra-high-speed, next-generation connectivity coverage of the country by the end of present programming period. A national computer emergency response team has been established within Ministry of Transport, Information Technologies and Communication. This team carries out tasks on prevention, protection, and analysis of computer incidents, and thus supporting the work of a number of departments and institutions. We strongly support the efforts to develop a working multi-stakeholder model of Internet governance. At the national level, the Ministry of Transport, Information Technologies and Communications actively collaborates with the Internet community, with the businesses, NGOs, and the academy. One of the results of this fruitful cooperation is the establishment of the national top-level domain in Cyrillic, .bg, which is currently in an advanced stage of implementation. Last year, we signed a memorandum of understanding with ICANN on cooperation regarding management of internet names in Europe and training of Bulgarian experts in internet governance. I sincerely hope that this forum will be beneficial to all of us, and that the debates, the exchange of experience and good practices will greatly contribute to come up with a strong message to further enhance the internet governance approach and practices. I wish you much success during EuroDIG 2015 in Sofia. All the best. Thank you.
Thank you also, Mr. Borisov. Thank you for joining us for the welcoming part. Hi again to everyone. I will try to explain briefly what SEEDIG is and what we are trying to do here today with this meeting. But first, I would like to thank you all for being here with us today for the first meeting of the Southeastern European Dialogue on Internet Governance, and to do some thanking to some people who have helped us during this process. So first, thank you to the EuroDIG Secretariat for giving us the opportunity to hold SEEDIG in the context of the EuroDIG meeting, and for all the support they have shown us during the past few months. Thank you also to the Bulgarian Ministry of Transport, Information Technology and Communications, and to UNICART also for their support. And thank you to my great team of people who have helped in the preparatory process for the past year, I can say. So as you have seen, SEEDIG is basically an IGF initiative, let's say a sub-regional IGF initiative, so a space for open, inclusive dialogue on current and emerging issues related to the internet, its use, its evolutions, and related things. But why SEEDIG, and why this platform for Southeastern Europe? Because we felt the need for a space for us, stakeholders in the region, to meet and discuss about internet governance issues that are, let's say, particularly relevant for us, and that maybe are not that relevant for, let's say, other parts of Europe or maybe other parts of the world. And it can be the digital divide, as we are still struggling with it in its various dimensions in this region, or the IDNs, the internationalized domain names, which so well reflect the diversity of this region in terms of languages and scripts, and so many other issues that we share in this region as challenges or concerns. So SEEDIG basically aims to provide us with a platform for a multi-stakeholder, open, inclusive dialogue on these issues. This doesn't mean that we will find solutions to all these issues in a platform as SEEDIG, but we can discuss about these problems. We can exchange our experiences, share views, learn from each other, maybe set up the basis of partnerships. And then, like it is the case with the global IGF and with some other IGF initiatives, hopefully these discussions can then influence the actual decisions being taken somewhere else, but by us, stakeholders participating in this platform. So this would be the first objective of SEEDIG, but it's a bit more than that. Because yes, we have challenges in the region and some concerns that, let's say, are particularly relevant to us, but we are all part of the global internet. And we always say that we want internet to stay open, to be secure and reliable, and we need to contribute to that, to this process of ensuring that the internet goes into the, let's say, right direction, whatever that means to us. And yes, again, we have these challenges in the region, but we need to make others aware of our challenges, of our interests and concerns, so we need to participate. And this would be the other objective of SEEDIG, to basically create better linkages between the realities in this region and the global processes in the internet governance ecosystem. Because yes, it is true that more and more stakeholders from this region participate in global internet governance meetings or organizations like the IGF, even EuroDIG, ICANN meetings, and some other more technical organizations. But we can do a bit more. And I will give you one example. Last year, the IGF was held in this region. It was in Istanbul. but the percentage of participants from our region, from Southeastern Europe, was only 6%, although the meeting again was in this region. And the year before, in 2013, only 3% of all participants in the IGF were from our region. And yes, I know this is not such a big region and I cannot really expect a big percentage, but again, I think we can do more. And we can work towards making sure that we actually participate in these global internet governance discussions and debates and make our voices heard and contribute to shaping the future of the internet, as the overarching theme of EuroDig says this year. One thing I see in my country, sometimes we have this tendency of waiting for others to basically contribute to making things work in the direction we would like to see them going. But we very rarely step in to contribute to that. We just wait and see. If something goes wrong, we don't step in, but we complain, and we always blame others. And I hope we don't do that with the internet, maybe from now, or hopefully from now. So again, I think we stakeholders in this region, we need to contribute a bit more and make sure there are those linkages between us, the realities in our region, the challenges we face, our issues and concerns, and the global and the pan-European discussions on internet governance. So we are trying through SEEDIG to basically empower actors in this region to better participate in such processes, to contribute to capacity building, to raising awareness, to making people understand, let's say, better what internet governance is and why we should participate. So this would be, in short, the two aims of SEEDIG. We will have a very strong capacity building dimension, especially for this meeting, and you will see this today, and especially in the first session, which will start soon. One quick note about the process. SEEDIG started as a bottom-up initiative. It is created by stakeholders from the region, with support from outside the region, of course. We have tried to make this an open, inclusive, and transparent process, and we hope we have succeeded. But as you have hopefully followed the preparatory process, please let us know if you saw anything that can be improved or made better. There is a feedback form available on the wiki, and I would like to kindly invite you all to take some minutes at the end of the meeting and fill it in. And hopefully this will be the start of a process, because we hope SEEDIG not to be a one-time event, but rather a process, and we can work together towards this. And I will stop here. Thank you again for being with us. I would like to encourage you all to participate in the discussion, to ask questions, to share your view, and be an active part of SEEDIG. I would like to give the floor to Sandra Hoferichter from the EuroDig Secretariat now. Sandra, please.
Thank you, Sorina. There's not much I can add, because I think you mentioned really the essentials of our meeting today. Dear organizers, dear SEEDIG ExCom, thank you for giving me the opportunity to address this first Southeastern European dialogue on internet governance. Dear Minister Borisov, thank you for providing the honor to addressing and welcoming those community in your region. It was around 1 year ago when Sorina wrote me an email asking, what do you think about a Southeastern European IGF? And while I could understand the need and the reasoning behind that, I had also the feeling that this could divide Europe even more. So we agreed with the team behind Sorina that we are going to work towards a joint effort to establish the first Southeastern European dialogue in conjunction with the EuroDig. I'm very touched by the fact that this community also took up the inclusive and participatory concept of EuroDig in terms of how to create a program, how to create sessions. I'm sure the program today will provide a lot of opportunities for controversial exchanges, and the results of the discussion will directly feed into the EuroDig during the next 2 days. With the interconnection of the SEEDIG and the EuroDig, we truly provide a sort of a best practice for the global IGF process, and because this is not self-fulfilling. looking at the meanwhile over 20 European IGF initiatives, we realize there is still space for improvement regarding the interconnection of the national and the global and the regional IGF. I think with this example, we are strengthening the overall IG debate and can provide another best practice and the best example for the global IGF. But there's also another aspect in this event. Recently, I read in a local newspaper about the Eurovision Song Contest. The writer compared the song contest with a bonfire where Europeans sit together, meet and celebrate while they are contesting over the best song for Europe. I think he was right to state that in a time full of conflicts, this kind of event is quite unique and encouraging. I truly believe that the next 2 days will also help us to get a better understanding for each other within Europe and within this region. And I wish you all to get the bonfire feeling at least at one moment during the next days. With the European Broadcasting Union as a partner, I think there is a pretty good chance. A first opportunity to get this feeling will be tonight for a small welcoming cocktail where SEEDIG participants and arriving EuroDIG participants have the chance to meet each other, to network, and to prepare for the next 2 days. It will be in the room Vitosha, which is just when you go around the lobby where you could register right now, where we have lunches later on. There we will have from 6 to 9 o'clock this small welcoming cocktail, and we are looking very much forward to see you there and to get in touch with each other personally. Thank you very much.
Thank you also, Sandra, and thank you again to you and the EuroDIG Secretariat for all your support during the past few months. This has been so much helpful. I would like now to invite Ilya Bazliankov as the host of SEEDIG and EuroDIG and also part of the SEEDIG organizing committee to give us a welcoming address.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. After my colleagues, I really don't have too much to add. But I would like to say that when I first heard about the SEEDIG idea was after the IGF in Istanbul. I really thought that this is something that must be done and shouldn't be a one-time event. Because from my experience in the region, the knowledge about internet governance process is not much, and people do not have chance to participate in larger events or travel to IGF to remote locations like Bali or Brazil this year. So it's better that we bring experts to the region and try to provoke a discussion. This was more than 1 year ago, and since that I actively participate in different meetings in order to shape the event. And I'm really glad that the first event is being held in Bulgaria together with EuroDIG. I wish you a fruitful work today and the next 2 days. And if you need anything or support, you can find me somewhere in the room. Thank you.
Thank you also, Ilya. And with this, we end the welcoming address and we move directly into the first session. So I would like to invite the key participants for the first session to take your seats and we can start. Hi again, everyone. We are ready to start the first SEEDIG session, Introduction to Internet Governance, what is Internet Governance and why should I care? As I've said earlier, SEEDIG has a very strong capacity building dimension. We are trying to raise a bit more awareness and interest in Internet governance. And this would be basically the aim of this first session, to explain a bit what Internet governance is, what are the various processes and organizations in the Internet governance ecosystem, to look a bit into the organizations and processes in this ecosystem, to see why we as stakeholders in this region participate or don't participate, what are the challenges and barriers to participation, and maybe how we can address them and move forward from here. We have some key participants with us today, and I will briefly introduce them. We have Markus Kummer from the ICANN Board of Directors and also advisor to the chair of the IGF Multistakeholder Advisory Group. We have Hibbard from the Council of Europe, Frédéric Donck from ISOC, and Jean-Jacques Sahel from ICANN. Thank you all for being with us today and for accepting our invitation. Before I give the floor to them to start the introduction, I would like to ask some questions to you all, because this is, again, a capacity building session, and we need to know a bit about each other and what we are doing here today. So my first question would be, how many of you are newcomers to an Internet governance meeting? Maybe a show of hands. Okay, we have some newcomers here. Good. In terms of stakeholder groups, for the IGF, for example, we have these 5 categories of stakeholders. We have the civil society, the private sector, the technical community, governments, and intergovernmental organizations. And one key principle of Internet governance is multi-stakeholder. So basically, stakeholders, all of them being together in these processes. So now my next question to you would be, can you show your hands whenever you hear your stakeholder group to have an idea of the representation in this room? So for civil society, how many of you are from civil society? Okay, thank you. The technical community, everything from ISPs to... Okay, more hands, but not too many. One there. Private sector. Oh, wow. So we need more private sector. That's definitely a sign. Yes, and thank you for being here. Government. Should I ask about intergovernmental organizations? Do we have the European Commission here? I think we do, and we have Lee from the Council of Europe. So theoretically, we have all stakeholder group represented, some of them in a shorter number, but I hope this will increase during the day. And my next question to you would be, I see some of you around here who have participated in some Internet governance meetings. Can some of you just tell me in a very short phrase, what do you think Internet governance is? And please don't be shy, and please take the floor and let's break the ice. If you don't raise your hand, I will come to you, the mic, so please do that. No one? Really? We have a youth here. Annie, can you tell us what you think about Internet governance?
Okay. Hello. Internet governance, for me, is the governance that is done by some participant from government, private sector, the civil society, and it is a complex of principles, norms, rules, and decision-making procedures that are shaping the use and the evolution of the internet.
Thank you, Annie. That was pretty good, like the standard definition of Internet governance. Please show your hands, or I'm coming. Okay, I am coming. Elvana, maybe you can give us a short, quick thing about Internet governance.
I cannot give any other definition besides the one that was given. What do you want? What do I feel Internet governance is? It's too many things. To my mind, it's more a process than anything else. It's a process of people getting together trying to understand more than to define the rules of the internet. And really this is how I would like to frame internet governance, a process of understanding. A process of understanding different interests, different perspectives that groups, societal groups are bringing to the table.
Thank you, Elvana. Anyone wants to step in now? Okay, I'm seeing no one, so I will give the floor to Markus. Markus, can you give us a brief introduction to internet governance? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Sorina, and congratulations to you for organizing this event. Your introduction made it clear that each region or sub-region may have different issues, and I think it's a great initiative to bring together people from this sub-region to see what are the issues you care about and want to talk about. No, and that was a very good start, actually, for the discussion on internet governance. It is a complex definition. I'm not going to read it out. I have it here in front of me, and it's sort of, when you read it, the eyes of most interlocutors glaze over. It is rather complex. But I think one thing that was made clear by the speakers in your introduction was it is not about governments. That was quite often a misunderstanding when we talked about internet governance, that people reacted, say, governments have nothing to do with that. No, it's not about governance. It's about governance, the abstract concept of governing. And it's also clear, that definition makes it clear that the summit, the World Summit on Information Society 10 years ago, adopted this working definition that made it clear it's a multi-stakeholder effort. It's not one group of people, it's not just the private sector, it's not just the technical community, it's not civil society, they all need to work together. And also the summit made it clear that's not contained in the definition, but internet governance is more than naming and addressing. When more than 10 years ago in the World Summit on Information Society the term came up, the focus was mainly on ICANN and the role of the US government, because ICANN up till now has a contract with the US government, and that was seen by many governments as inappropriate. But then the discussion showed and widened that internet governance, yes, it relates to the technical infrastructure, to the logical infrastructure, but also it relates to issues related to the use and abuse of the internet. And I think most users are more concerned about the use of the internet as long as the internet works. And Jean-Jacques maybe will say a little bit more about what ICANN does. And let me also just insert briefly, I'm not speaking here on behalf of ICANN. I speak here in my personal capacity. Jean-Jacques will speak on behalf of ICANN. But my thesis would be that most users don't really care too much about how the names get allocated to addresses as long as it works. Last night in my hotel room, it didn't work. Then I do care. Then I get annoyed. But I don't really, the Wi-Fi didn't work in the hotel, so, but that's not ICANN's fault. Although some people tend to think, yes, as Frédéric just said. Well, anyway, and the question, the shaping the future of the internet is also nicely put. I think internet governance in the end is about what kind of internet do we want. Do we want an open, global, interoperable internet that is shaped by multi-stakeholder participation, that is a new way of doing things, or do we want an internet that is administered in a traditional way, as quite often the comparison is made between the telephony and the internet. The telephony is a centralized network. The intelligence is at the core of the network. The internet is a decentralized network of networks, and the intelligence is at the edges. And the administration of the internet, the various organizations that deal with it, They work in a distributed fashion. It's a distributed network of organizations, and that is adapted to the underlying distributed technology. And the past so far has shown that this way of organizing internet governance is best adapted to the underlying technology, and it has allowed the internet to develop and to flourish, and that's why we have the internet as it is now. And let's hope we can continue to let the internet with continuing innovations. And one key word is it's permissionless innovation. Nobody has to ask the government first when you come up with any new innovation, and that's how we have the internet we have, and let's hope we can keep it that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Markus, for this introduction. I have one quick question to you. We sometimes talk about internet governance processes and some key principles for these processes. One of them will be multi-stakeholderism. Are there other key principles for internet governance processes?
Well, I think what I try to say is it's the bottom-up nature of all the policy development and also the way the technology gets developed by all the organizations involved. The standards get developed by the Internet Engineering Task Force, and anyone who is interested can participate, can contribute, can develop a standard. The addresses get distributed by the regional internet registries, ripe for the European region, and they have their own processes where everybody can participate, and ICANN again is responsible for the names, and again ICANN has bottom-up processes, and as you yourself know very well, there's also governments are involved in the Government Advisory Committee. So these are underlying principles that are common to all the institutions dealing with the technical infrastructure, and the bottom-up open and inclusiveness of the nature. Now, the issues related to the use and abuse of the internet, there we have different fora, and Lee from the Council of Europe is what represents one of them, and they're usually done in a more top-down way as they're intergovernmental by nature. The ITU just celebrated the 150th anniversary, so it was set up a long time ago. But what is also interesting to see is the intergovernmental organizations, and I think the Council of Europe may be first among them, have really opened up to the idea of having open and inclusive processes, open also to other stakeholders. So this is encouraging to see, but I think the commonality is, in essence, that the governance structures need to be adapted to the underlying technology, which is an open technology.
Thank you, Markus. I will get back to you on the IGF, since that is also part of your introductory. But before I do that, I have some questions for our key participants and other participants in the room. And I will start with the key participants. And I will also ask you to tell us in a short sentence, what do you think internet governance is? So again, not the basic standard definition, but what it means to you. And I will start with Tanel. Thank you for joining us, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Estonia.
Yes, thank you very much, and sorry to be late. Distances are short here, but hills are high, too high for me, so I had to do a little bit of climbing. And you put me in the spot right away. I really appreciate this. I think what internet governance means to me is to find the ecosystem of existing together for governments, for private sector, and also for non-governmental organizations, civil society organizations. I think this is the best way to summarize this.
Thank you. Lee, I'm looking at you, please.
Thank you. Lee Hibbard from the Council of Europe, which is an international governmental organization of 47 countries, including Bulgaria. It involves the European Court of Human Rights, the European Convention on Human Rights, the Cybercrime Convention, these things you may know about. In a quick sentence, I think governance of the internet is not regulation of the internet. So I think that it's clear that when we think about governance, at least immediately, who's controlling, who's regulating, and I think for many it's still the idea of the state regulates, and I think that's the difference. Governance is this making sure that at the end of the chain, if there's a need to do things about the internet, of course to refrain from perhaps over-regulating it, but if there's a need to do things, that the governance before any policy is adopted is done in a shared fashion. So governance is not regulation, and regulation should be done with governance.
Thank you, Lee, for pointing that out. Jean-Jacques, please.
And first, good morning, everyone. To me, if we look at the definition that was crafted 10 years ago, no, 12 years ago now, 10 years ago, which took months to put together, it's quite a broad definition. So to me, there's two main areas when we talk about internet governance. One is the area that I evolve in, which is the area that I refer to usually when I speak about internet governance and internet governance ecosystem. It's what some people call the technical layer of the internet. It's basically the way that the internet community as a whole coordinates how the internet works. Basically, it's the ways in which we make the internet function. That's the kind of the hidden layer that most of us just don't see because the internet works. And then there's the other big area of internet governance, which personally I like to call more internet policy, and that's where you see issues that are on the internet, issues such as privacy or security or net neutrality, etc. So not how the internet works, but how its use raises policy questions, regulatory questions, etc.
Thank you, Jean-Jacques. Frédéric?
So thank you. Yeah, thank you. Look, beyond what has been said already, quite like the paragraph 35 of the tennis agenda. I mean, it might be good to remember this, that 10 years ago we adopted great principles and very strong principles, and it's key this year especially to remember this. So it says something like the management of the internet encompasses both technical and policies issues and should involve all stakeholders and relevant intergovernmental and international organizations. So it's those are very strong principles. Now, ISOC, coming from the technical community, we're home to the IETF, we would add principles as transparency, inclusiveness, and collaborative processes. So that would be my short answer.
Thank you. Thank you all for these short introductions into internet governance. I'm going back to the room with some questions, but first I would like to give you the opportunity to ask questions to our key participants. So please show your hands and I will come with a mic. If not, I will ask questions to you, so it's your choice. Okay, no one wants to ask a question. I will ask you questions. Markus said a very important thing, that internet governance is not only about government and is not mainly about governments. But us in this region, or at least some of us, we have this challenge of translating internet governance into local languages and making sure that when we translate governance, I'm doing this, people don't think that it is a governmental-led process. So my question to you would be, and to representatives of some countries in the room, to tell us a bit about how you translate the term into your local languages and what are the challenges with this. I'm looking for some show of hands. If you don't do that, I'm coming. So please.
It's very important, Grigori Zagian, Armenia. It's a very important point, how to translate this very hard point, governance. Governance means something very global. But in our case, it's, if you translate from Armenian, it's a government, so it means direct power, not governance within. By the way, the same situation we have in Russian. Управление, it's regulation. It's regulation. So there is no exact translation. So, and I think the main point is to put the meaning in this word by your work. If you will have exact understanding what you want to do, it means that you will give new meaning to this term.
Thank you. So basically explaining the term even if the translation doesn't make the difference very clear. I'm seeing another hand. Thank you.
Thank you. Krasimonsky, the Bulgarian IT agency. I would like to challenge actually at high level, and it's about the word governance. Is it the right word to call the process or the system or whatever we may define as internet something, because internet is kind of all. To me, internet is an ecosystem. An ecosystem does not need to be governed. Ecosystem need to be put in balance. And to be put in balance, you have to find the forces, you have to find the principles driving this ecosystem. And actually, it's about this dialogue, which is the best balance in this system. For it to work as it should work. I mean, the word governance does not fit that well in this because it's related to regulation, to rules, to policy, etc. If you have governance, you need somebody to govern that. As the government, it's ICANN, it's somebody else, but there should be a body, authorized, etc. If we're talking about policy, somebody has to enforce that. If we're talking about ecosystem, we have to see how what's the best balance of this system and how we can achieve this balance. If you agree with me out or disagree with me, I would appreciate any comment at this panel, but I think that's kind of challenge to the principle. Whether it's a definition, internet governance at all, or I don't know, I think I'm aiming high. I mean, if we challenge the internet governance, that's too far probably, but I think it's worth discussion.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Just a very quick reactions. I think I would agree with pretty much all you said. Actually, for what concerns our ecosystem, I explained the technical layer. Certainly, I prefer to talk about coordination rather than governance, because it's coordination between different bodies, and not even just bodies, but also processes and even individuals. And each of those has got a specific role, whether it's standards development or coordination of procedures, etc. So governance is a much broader term, you're absolutely right. And the definition that was mentioned before, and especially when you look at linguistic definitions, makes it all complex, because some people think governance means something completely different. For what we do, it's coordination. We work with others and we try to come together to an understanding when it's needed, basically just so that the internet works. So I think coordination is a better word than governance. If you find a better term, I'll take it.
If I may interfere, I strongly disagree with that.
Okay. Well, you wrote the definition, that's probably why.
I didn't write it, but I was part of the group. But I get the point. I agree in principle about the ecosystem aspects, but governance, and I also agree it tends to be misinterpreted, but it is an abstract term, and the definition actually takes that into account, and that's why it's such a complex definition. Coordination, I think collaboration is the better word, because coordination always has a coordinator, and when working for the UN, I learned that everybody's in favor of coordination, but nobody wants to be coordinated. But what is typical, I think, for the internet is a voluntary collaboration of people who work together. So my strong plea would avoid coordination. That can give the wrong idea. That can give idea to some, okay, I want to be the coordinator. It is collaboration. Thank you.
It's okay. No, please.
Okay. So Valentina from Bosnia, to make it short. I agree that governance is abstract, and probably because it's abstract, this is the reason why people do not participate. We cannot say that there is just one way. It's happened in different countries, because countries are different. But I think that if we translate in some of this Balkan language, it's more about management. The word that people use, upravljati. It's more about management, which is not governance. But also I think that in this small country, what's happened is the people do not recognize their own interest to come together. It's not the case that here there are so many civil society organizations. If we look at the academy, the technical community, or if we look at the business, the ones, you have the big actors. They don't need to be active in the local small country. They can do at the regional, at the global level. So we miss the possibility to be all together, the five of us, but also the genders, because there are diversity. So I think that governance is really abstract. We need to pick a body that needs to embody all the differences. I'm talking about gender, race, class, but also all these different groups. So I think that our little country missed the interest. There is not a recognition that the governance at the national level, it's relevant, it's something that we need to discuss, and it's not just a copy and paste process to access the EU or to access any other big body. Thank you.
Valentina. Tanel, you wanted to say something,
yes,
please?
Just very shortly, maybe a little bit demystifying this word governance. I personally don't understand governance as something where government rules over the people. I think governance itself actually already entails a dialogue. I mean, we elect our representatives, and then we have in 4 or 5 or sometimes less, sometimes more years again, chance to elect participate in elections, and also between elections we have a possibility to participate in the society. And also the governance has different layers. It has a local government element or local government segment. So I think that I wouldn't say that governance means that government rules over all the other actors. Thank you.
Yeah, Yrjö Länsipuro from ISOC Finland. Just to put some perspective on the current use of the word governance, it became fashionable in the 90s, when after the Cold War there were a few conferences organized by the United Nations, and they all tried to solve specific cross-cutting problems. So global governance was this big sort of overriding idea, and one of the definitions coming from that time was collective efforts to identify, understand, or address worldwide problems that go beyond the capacity of individual states to solve. So basically, it's an effort. It's not a fixed system, but it's a collective effort to do something, and it's about things that are just beyond the capacity of individual states. Thank you.
Thank you also. Ali, you wanted to say something?
Thank you. I'm an internet policy coordinator, so I am in the Council of Europe working across the organization on internet governance questions. So I'm talking to people from democracy, from education, from privacy, etc. And so my job is partly to bring together this internet governance understanding in the organization across subjects. So it's a sort of it can be cooperation, it can be collaboration, it's a glue. It's also important to bring those things together to see the whole picture, the ecosystem more clearly. If you take them apart, they have a meaning, but putting them together means they have a different altogether meaning. And I think it's very important to see the whole picture, because there's so many things distributed. And so part of the job I do of governance is to try to show coherence and a holistic view of what governance means. But I would go one step further regarding the question of cooperation or collaboration. Yes, a collaboration, yes, but there has to be also a respect for the different roles and responsibilities of the different actors. You can't just collaborate. I mean, at the end of the day, some different actors have different roles. So, governments have to protect your human rights. So, and that also means on the internet. So there is a responsibility of the government to do that. And therefore it needs to collaborate with others to do that. Certainly, but there has to be a respect, a recognition, acknowledgement that governance also means respect for the roles of the private sector, for the role of the governments, and the role of civil society, etc., and the technical community. Thank you.
Thank you also, Lee.
Yeah, thank you, Sorina. Just to jump on what I just heard, it's interesting to note that when we start talking about governance, you might have so many different definitions of governance, and trying to define governance says much more about yourself than about governance. It says about who you are. It says about which stakeholder you represent. And to some extent, it says about your vision of life. Are you centric, control freak, or someone who believes that a multiple participation might solve issues? So it's a good lesson for life. Talking about the ecosystem, I love this image. an ecosystem normally is supposed to adjust itself to different parameters. This is why we need to agree, while governance might have multiple definitions, on clear principles that we all agree on, and those are transparency, inclusiveness, and multi-stakeholders. So multi-stakeholders is something you will hear often in our mouth in those conversations. Let me remind you that it's not an objective in itself, it's a process. We feel that when we take care of the process, we obtain better results, because we have people giving their own voice and they're being heard, and we see results, and this is more efficient in this ecosystem. So I'd like to give that as a thought. Thank you.
Kamen Spasov from Sofia University, Bulgaria. Talking about governance, the best way to figure out what is it, and all of us to be on the same page, we need to go to the library, take a vocabulary, and look at the definition of the word governance, and then we will be on the same page. From the discussion here, what I am hearing is that at the end we are talking about principles. So if we took what Krasi taught at the beginning, thinking about ecosystem, and this is kind of self-organizing system, and internet is a system. So we are talking about governance of a system, and there are different principles how to govern a system. One of the system is to govern it as a ecosystem, and it's kind of self-organizing system, organism. The other way is master-slave at the other end. So we can kind of strong hierarchy, who is responsible for what and things like that. What is in the definition of ITU, and this is said 10 years ago, it's a multi-stakeholder, so it's about much more about self-organizing community, having collaboration, cooperation, respect, but all these are principles, and I think that governance is the right word to use here. And there are principles, and these principles work well. Okay, there are some problems, rising problems, and the whole idea of this event is to find or to propose ways to solve these problems and to keep this multi-stakeholder model, because it's kind of self-organizing, respecting, and etc.
Thank you. So we still have some people in the room wanting to take the floor. I will do that.
Okay, Daniel Coucher from register.bg. I kind of like the comparison of the internet with an ecosystem. And one interesting thing about ecosystems is that when you try to organize them, order them, make them behave, you are actually destroying the ecosystems. And this is a very important thing to keep in mind when trying to govern the internet, even with the best intentions, even from every different perspective, be it from the technical community or the business community or the government, or even the general public. Any attempt to put too much organization into it will probably distort it, and it may distort it in a way that will make it die or turn into something else. And here the question is, do we want the current internet or we want something else? And if we want something else, maybe we could shape it. If we don't, we better find less intrusive ways to keep it working. And it will keep working by itself, because the internet is something very unique, both on the technology level and on the interaction level. And the unique thing is that it is so far the only technical achievements of humans that actually matches the interhuman relationships, the trust models and behavior. Well, this was one of the points I wanted to make. Another point is I do see a very, very big problem with the language that is used. Most of the terms that are used on the international scale are based on the English language with some adaptations. And they are, in most cases, and that's an interesting observation, most of the words that are used in this area are not possible to translate in many of the languages. For example, we talk about policy at all different levels. In our Bulgarian language, there is just one word for this, and it matches the English word for politics. So when you come to Bulgaria with good intentions to explain things and start talking to people about policy, those people say, okay, they talk about politics. And the government can't say, okay, this is our job. And the normal people say, okay, no, we don't want to do anything with this. So you see why people don't participate. So I think this is a very, very big problem. And it is our task to find a way maybe to change the keywords, maybe. I think this is probably the best solution. Then I have another, okay, actually two more points to make. One is that from my observation on how the internet works for more than 25 years already, I have seen that the best model that works on the internet is the Cold War scheme. You don't do things that you don't want others to do to you. And this is more or less how the internet is built and how it is sustainable. And the last point is about stakeholders. There is one interesting thing about stakeholders. By definition, this word, as far as my understanding of English goes, should mean somebody who owns a stake. And on the internet, owning a stake means different things to different people. But in my opinion, the most sensible explanation would be somebody who has done something for others. I mean, who has contributed to the existence of the internet on different levels. I mean, different groups can contribute different things, like technical people could, for example, design protocols, make implementations, build infrastructure. Businesses could invest in those things, and so on. So when defining who the stakeholders are, we need to first ask the question, what your stake in the internet is. I mean, not what your interests in internet is, but what you have done in order to make the internet work or even exist. Thank you.
Thank you also, Daniel. I'm still in the room and I will ask a few more people for some gender balance. I see Belma here. Belma.
And did you say gender balance? Because I heard gender. Good morning, Belma from Bosnia and Herzegovina, and also part of the summer school, part of the pre-event EuroDig. This is my third or fourth conference, and whenever talking about internet governance, I never see female, and I don't. You are one of them, and I was actually very proud that I saw two women, that I spoke with two women who actually deal with these men over here. And I think it's not about disrespecting one or other gender. I would just like to see few more girls, at least, if nothing, to get more inspired, because when I see one female like you, I feel more comfortable of raising the hand and actually speaking about the topic. So perhaps next year. Maybe next year or later.
Yes.
Thank you.
Actually, I want a picture. Thank you very much. No. Can I just have one picture here? And then I'm coming back.
And while you're doing that, I have the European Commission here, and I would like to briefly ask you a short view on internet governance. And thank you for being with us.
Respect.
So thank you very much. We represent not the girls, well, I should speak for Christina, the old lady point of view. Well, first of all, it's really wonderful to be here. It's my first EuroDig meeting, although I've been to many IGFs. So I'm really pleased that we're here, and particularly in this Southeastern European grouping, sub-grouping of the EuroDig, which I think is really very important. And we would really like to see even more support and participation from this region, because it's a very important region. It's an area where we think the representation, participation has not been as active and as thorough as it could have been. And I think that the remote participation should help that as well. Of course, having the meetings in this part of the world helps too. You mentioned, of course, the IGF in Istanbul, and we were very pleased that the IGF took place in that region as well. But I think when I looked at the participant list in this meeting, I didn't see any Turks, or maybe only one. Yeah, one. So I think there's room for further expansion and reinforcement of the group, and we encourage very much this kind of activity. The European Commission, of course, in all its activities, whether it's regulatory, legislative, policy, etc., is obliged, and of course wants to, but is obliged to take into the consideration the views and opinions of all stakeholders. So for us, multi-stakeholderism is raison d'être. It goes without saying that we have to do everything that takes into consideration the views of all partners. It doesn't mean that we can always accept everyone's individual position, but we have to look at everything, take into consideration everything before coming to a decision. So we're very pleased to be here, and Christina Monti is here with me as well, and we're going to be here for the next 3 days. Thanks for letting us come. Oh, and by the way, oh no, I'll talk. No, just one thing. I'm supposed to say it tomorrow in the big meeting, but just to say that the European Commission, of course, is also supporting morally not just this process, but EuroDig itself, and we've finally been able to make also financial commitment, small financial contribution, which isn't finalized yet, but it's on its way, so we're hoping to be able to make a financial contribution as well to the EuroDig process. Thanks.
Christina, do you want to say something? Thank you, Megan, and thank you to the European Commission for your support. Yes? Either of you?
Thank you. Thanks to the European Commission and an even greater financial support next year, no doubt. For the gender balance, I'm almost tempted to ask if there's any Bosnian males in the room. I've only met Thank you. I've met lots of Bosnian females this morning. Thank you for being here with us. So I think we can go onto that later. What I thought would be useful, and it touches on kind of the definition of internet governance, but also why we're here, is just to think about why we are here, all of us today. There's a number of reasons, but a bit of history. And about a year ago, we were at the ICANN meeting in London, and that'll give me an excuse to explain what ICANN does. Basically, we're just one of the actors in this internet governance ecosystem, and one of the sort of main missions we have is effectively that when you type a web address in your browser, www.eurodig.org, basically your computer sends a query out to try and find this computer which has the Eurodig web page. And we basically coordinate the global community of registries, registrars, and others, users, governments, etc., that effectively makes it all happen behind the scenes. That's what ICANN is about. And we meet, we have ongoing working groups online, etc., and then we have about 3 meetings a year somewhere in the world. The next one is in Buenos Aires. A year ago we were in London, and basically a few of us have been dealing with internet issues for a while, being in lots of internet conferences, and you always see people from this region. People from Montenegro, people from Serbia, people from Bosnia, people from Bulgaria, etc. And we always thought, there's something here. It's a really dynamic, but maybe slightly small community. And so we just sent a couple of emails out and said, let's meet informally. And we had, I remember it was a very small room. I'm not even sure we even had coffee. There was about 8 or 9 of us. There was Dusan, I think Daniel was here, Ilya, a couple of others. Sorina was in the background by email. I think Oksana, you might have been here. And we just said exactly what Megan was saying before. Southeastern Europe is a place where we have a lot of people involved in the internet. And of course, the internet nowadays is not a foreign land. It's not a 7th continent, as I sometimes hear people say. The internet is here among us. We each have a stake. We might not own a stake, but we have a stake in it. Whether we're a registry because we operate an extension, or whether we're a government because we need to keep an eye on what's happening there, or whether simply we're a user. We're a human being and we're using the internet every day. We all have a stake in it. And this region has got a number of issues which are specific to it. And it's got a number of countries which have often common culture and certainly a lot of ties and a lot of links. And we always thought there's something that can be done here. We can get a dynamic here. We can get a dialogue going. And from that meeting in London, we had a few more meetings at the IGF in Istanbul, and then at other ICANN meetings, and a lot of conference calls, a lot of work by Sorina behind the scenes, amongst others, and Ida. And we're here today. This is the first Southeastern Europe dialogue on internet governance. And this is a chance for us to get this community in this part of the world to get to know each other, to start working more and more together, to make sure that issues related to the internet across the board gets more discussed, better coordinated, that we get to a better result, a better internet for the region. So next year, I hope you'll be back. I hope that we will have at least half of the panel with females. But not just that, I think in the meantime, before next year, I want to see many more meetings, many more dialogues, many more workshops. I know some are planning some. Dusan will be doing another fantastic DIDS conference in Belgrade. Ilya will be doing more of his domain fests in December in here in Sofia, and there'll be more. I would encourage you to continue this dialogue. Please exchange emails, phone numbers today. Keep in touch. Come together to organize more discussions in your country, in your regions. Get this going, because we have a unique chance with the internet, which is that this is a unique system that links mankind, and it's one where every single one of us, wherever we come from, not only have a stake, but we can have a say, thanks to this multi-stakeholder model. And it's only if we raise our voices and if we speak with each other that we're going to make it happen. So today is our chance to get something really good going for this region.
So I'd like to come back to what this gentleman said from Bulgaria, and thank you for this. Again, about the ecosystem. What we need to remember in an ecosystem is that precisely it's a system. So governance is systemic. And you know what it means? It means that if someone moves in a system, this has an impact on all the others. So the governance here is to make sure that when someone moves, there is a process to just agree on this move. And this is why, again, we are very cautious about the process itself. When a government or different governments decide to do something that impacts the internet, we're talking about the health of the internet, this has a great impact on the other stakeholders. So this is why we feel that the systemic part of it needs to be underlined. But this is challenging, because the systemic part precisely put everybody on the same level. So I remember this member of government, I won't name him, but it was in Rio in 2007, who was very shocked that he was not being given a slot to speak, and he was in the middle of those civil society guys and saying, hey, I don't even have a name on my seat and my 3-minute slot to speak, and I have to wait and wave my hand like the others. Yes, this is a systemic approach. Everybody's on the same level. So systemic is challenging for the establishment, for sure. But again, this is how this thing is being built, and everybody has a say, but again, there is an impact on everybody when someone moves. Thank you.
Thank you, Frédéric.
Thank you. I've got 2 points. I'd like to first queue up someone quite important in the discussion about governance, and that's the chair of the GAC, of the Governmental Advisory Committee, because it's a very important thing to think about one body, which is ICANN, which is a pure player, let's say, in terms of multi-stakeholder dialogue. And Thomas is the chair of the GAC of the governments, which meet, and there are over 150. And I'd like to know his understanding of governance in that pure player environment, first of all. But before we get there, the gentleman over there mentioned about principles, and there's lots of principles about internet governance flying around. I think over 25 sets of principles, and I encourage you to look at them from all different organizations, including the Council of Europe, 10 principles. And so you'll see there what it means for different bodies, what governance means, and it varies, and there are commonalities, and that came to that culminated in last year in something called the Net Mondial, which had its own statement, multi-stakeholder statement, which had human rights and shared values as part of its paper. And I think that paper is quite important for you to think about what governance means. And I think what it does, it goes beyond the stakeholder groups. It recognizes that it's a shared space, that there are shared values, that there are different actors in the space, that regulation, even regulation perhaps, needs to be done with other actors. And that we need to accept, because the internet is quite special in that respect. And I think that's very important. I think that the other point which I'd like to make is that internet governance is unique in that it's creating new legitimacy for actors. So in the previous times, you had state, you had private sector and civil society, but really it was about the state, I guess, mainly, and there were different forces. But really now, so if you didn't fit into one of those categories, you were not legitimate to speak in meetings perhaps. Who has the voice? So now internet governance gives many more actors, children, young people, technical community, other actors, plenty of other actors, the chance to speak about how you wish the internet to be shaped, the web we want, Magna Carta, whichever discussion. And I think the question of legitimacy is new. That's a new part of internet governance. It hasn't been seen before, and it's something which is growing. So I pass the floor maybe to Thomas. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee, and good morning, everybody. My name is Thomas. I come from Switzerland, which is the small country with the mountains in the middle of Europe. You spoke so long that I almost forgot your question, but knowing him for quite many years, I know that he did this to give me time to prepare for a response, of course. And I'll try to be brief. Well, basically, governance is the way that people set rules for something that they think needs to be governed. I'm just about to organize my thoughts for the next session. I'll pick up on this. In internet governance, it's maybe the rules are less based on law, on things that are made by lawyers, by politicians, but they have been made by technicians and then by the industry and by people who use it. But for me, governance, and this is why also we had a Eurodig a few years ago in Stockholm that was titled "Who Sets the Rules on the Internet?" And that was what Lee has already, and many others already have answered. Question is, who sets the rules? Governance is not, doesn't equal governments, but I wouldn't also be afraid to avoid the word governance. It's not just cooperation, we're all here nicely working together. Sometimes you need to take decisions. Sometimes people profit, sometimes people win, sometimes people lose. So it's an illusion to say, well, there is no governance, it's just cooperation. I disagree. The question is, who sets the rules for a system that is governed? And this is the key point. Thank you.
Sorina, sorry. My question to Thomas was, in his role as a GAC chair, because I mean, it's quite a special role in a pure player community for different actors.
Try to avoid that. Okay. No. Well, actually, my role is very limited because governments in ICANN have an advisory role. So I'm basically the moderator or the facilitator of 150 members of the advisory committee, of which something like 50, 60 normally actively take part. And I try to get them to a consensus, which is the model derived from the UN under which we work, among ourselves. And then if our consensus is not the same like what other players in the ICANN system wants, I try to facilitate discussion between governments and the rest of the community. I don't see myself as the boss of the GAC or the Mr. President, Monsieur le Président. Sometimes people start talking to me. Coming from my bottom-up cultured country, I see myself as maybe at a maximum a primus inter pares, but rather a moderator that is trying to help find consensus and a common ground. Thank you.
Thank you also, Thomas, and thank you to all for contributing to this lively debate. We started a bit difficult, but we went ahead well. Let's look a bit into processes and organizations in the internet governance ecosystem, because we have spoken about the concept and the principles, but let's look at what's there in the ecosystem. And Markus, the floor is yours to speak a bit about the IGF, the Internet Governance Forum. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Well, the IGF was a child of WSIS, of the World Summit on Information Society. In the discussions on internet governance and coming up with a working definition, the working group on internet governance identified that there was something missing out there. There were many organizations, but there was no place where all organizations could come together and discuss cross-cutting issues. And they proposed setting up an internet governance forum that was taken up by the summit. And the summit very carefully negotiated language that made it clear that governments didn't want a new organization. They just wanted a place to get together where they could discuss with all stakeholders. So the language agreed on was then to ask the Secretary General of the United Nations to convene a new platform for multi-stakeholder dialogue. And that is the IGF. In many ways, it is the synthesis between the top-down, the traditional top-down approach of governments as they work in intergovernmental organizations, the UN, where they have summits, and the bottom-up world of the internet community. The IGF clearly took on the methodology from the internet community by having an open room, giving anyone a voice, as Lee just said, and as we have witnessed here this morning, with a very vibrant discussion among all participants. At the same time, the IGF has a link to the traditional world of intergovernmental cooperation through the fact that it is convened by the Secretary General of the UN. But it's not a UN activity as such. It's linked to the UN at an arm's length, and it is also, and that is important to know, not part of the regular UN budget. This gives it more flexibility in terms of rules of procedures. As Frédéric said, ministers have to queue up behind the microphone. They don't have a seat behind a table where it says minister of their country or whatever. They are participants among equals. Now, some compromises have to be made to make sure that ministers come, but the basic principle is the forum allows for open and inclusive participation of anyone who is interested. And the accreditation process is a very light one. People are asked whether they have relevant expertise and experience, and there is a light check on that. So you all qualify, as you have proved through your words. The financing, because it's not part of the UN, is done through extra budgetary contributions, that is voluntary contributions, and that gives me an opportunity to put on another hat I have. I'm the secretary of the Internet Governance Forum Support Association. We have set this up to collect also funds to support the IGF. The chairman of the association is here in the room, Raul from ISOC. Maybe show yourself there. And we obviously would be keen to see you joining this IGF Support Association. We have a website, you can click and join through the website, and we have an annual membership fee, but the membership fee is not here so much to raise money, it's more to show that we have political support, and we hope to raise more money for the IGF. Now, we have now moving into the IGF mandate has been renewed once in 2010, and we are now in the phase where it has been considered again by the General Assembly, whether it should be renewed again. There has been much support for the IGF, and the fact that there are now 12 or 13 regional and sub-regional IGF initiatives and more than 20 national ones show that the model has spread, and there is a perceived need for this kind of dialogue also at the national and regional levels. Now, some people say they're disappointed because they had expected something more like a traditional intergovernmental organization that comes up with resolutions and papers for people to take home. And this is clearly not something the IGF was set up. It's not a negotiating platform. It's a platform for exchanging information, for discussion, for sharing best practices, for learning from each other. And that has proved remarkably successful. And there has also been a growing recognition that this is actually helpful. As several speakers have said, this helps people, it helps governments also make better decisions when they hear from other stakeholders what are their concerns. The technical community need to tell governments whether something works or does not work. Civil society is, I think, an important watchdog to say maybe this solution infringes on some rights we are attached to. And the private sector, the business community, obviously they're in the business of doing business, and they have to say what helps them making business. It is, looking back at some intergovernmental organization, it is remarkable that the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, and the World Trade Organizations, they both came to the conscious conclusion that it's better not to regulate, to allow the internet to develop on e-commerce, for instance, rather than to regulate and impose obstacles to the future development of the internet. So the IGF is here to allow this dialogue to happen, and while it is not here to take decisions, it's not the respective role, to go back to the definition of the IGF, to take decisions on matters which are within the remit of other organizations, but the IGF, through the dialogue, can actually shape the decisions that are taken elsewhere. It can prepare decisions, it can raise awareness for issues, and because there is a multi-stakeholder dialogue, there is always a reality check there. If one stakeholder group wants to run away with one proposal, there are other stakeholder groups who make sure that the broad perspective of all actors involved gets into the decision shaping. Now, we had soul-searching, introspective process. There was a working group on IGF improvement that came up with a recommendation, and that clearly said you should move towards more tangible results. and some efforts have been made. Last year we reintroduced best practice forums, and they came up with some written reports. And I learned, when was it, last week, from Vlada, saw him coming into the room, he's sitting there, yes, that the best practice report on sea certs, for instance, was used in Serbia as a model for setting up their national sea cert. So that is a direct impact coming from the IGF. We have more of these best practice forums. The one on sea certs continues. We have one on spam, one on multi-stakeholder mechanisms, one on violence against women on the internet. So there is intersessional work going on, and and we also have the dynamic coalitions that do some intersessional work, and they have their own processes. We are in the middle of trying to integrate this more into the mainstream, and the national and regional IGF initiatives are a very important part of that. We have not found the best way of doing this, but it is clear there's so much happening all over the world in all continents that there needs to be better linkages to the main IGF. Also, every region has different priorities, as this discussion this morning has already shown. There are different concerns, but nevertheless, it's important, I think, also to see what are the commonalities. There may be difference. On the whole, developing countries are much more concerned with issues related to access to the internet, whereas European internet users are maybe more concerned about human rights issues, privacy issues. I would be interested to find out more what are the concrete concerns of this particular region. So we heard some already, but and there's great variations from the regions, but I think we have to bring it more to the top. This year we have a thematic process, and all the regional IGFs have been asked whether they can contribute to bring on bringing the next billion online. It may not be your top priority, but nevertheless, it would be interesting to hear what you have to say. And with that, I think I have already talked for too much. Thank you, Sorina.
Thank you, Markus. That was a very good introduction into the IGF. One quick thing, we have some national IGF initiatives being built in this region, in Southeastern Europe. We have a Croatian IGF, which was created this year. They had a meeting early this year. An Armenian IGF is being built. I think we have a sort of a Serbian IGF. We have a Russian IGF, Ukrainian IGF. So I think we are getting there slowly, but we are starting to participate more and be more active in this internet governance world. Frédéric, I am looking at you because we've spoken about ICANN, we've spoken a bit about the Council of Europe, but can you tell us a bit about ISOC and its role in the internet governance ecosystem?
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. So we home to the ITF, so that's our, I would start with this. I mean, ISOC generally, we see ourselves, and we are the link between policy and the technology. So we try to be this platform where people can coordinate, well, not coordinate, can collaborate with each other. But we home to the IETF. So the IETF is the world standardization body. So it's about protocols, parameters, etc. So this is the reason why, by the way, we also are part of the conversation in the INAT transition on those specific registries, but that's another story. So the IETF is just crafting those parameters for that everybody use when using the internet. We used to say that we are above the wire and below the application. So this is where the IETF stands. The remarkable characteristic of the IETF is that precisely we do implement to ourselves the governance principles that we claim should be implemented at worldwide level. So the principles to contribute to the IETF are, it's really truly inclusive and collaborative and transparent. So I would invite each here in this room to join us to the next IETF that will take place in Prague in July. you will see that you can actually just register it and be part of those conversations on the many protocols and parameters that will be adopted freely by participants. So if you dare, among those many geeks, to raise your hands and say, I have something to say about this protocol, just do it and you will be heard. So this is the way we believe collaboration should be done, in a very open way. So that is the part, this is the technical community. But on a wider level, we are very engaged on all the conversation. First in the IGF, this is critical for us. Markus just said it, so we have our vice president here, Raoul, who is the chair of the IGF Support Association. But we are also engaged in coordinating the technical community vis-à-vis OECD, for example, or ITU. So that's, in a nutshell, what we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Frédéric. So we have, let's say, a general overview on the internet governance ecosystem. There are so many processes, so many organizations. We have some of them represented here. Let's look a bit into participation, and especially participation for the various categories of stakeholders, why participation is important, what we can do to increase that participation. And before I go to the room, I'd like to ask Tanel to give us a brief overview on participation, why you think it's important to be in these processes as a government, but not only as a government. Thank you.
Thank you. Perhaps in this case, I would first put on the second hat I have. I don't know whether I think it works. It works, yes. The second hat I have, and this is the thematic coordinator for the internet issues at the Council of Europe. And as Lee Hibbard already pointed out, Council of Europe is the intergovernmental organization. And intergovernmental organization of 47 member states. And I think that in this room today, I can be very frank, not all of those member states are exactly in the same line when it comes to internet governance issues. There are, let's say, two, maybe three countries that have somewhat different view on the role of government and role of the civil society. But having said that, actually today, Council of Europe adopts two declarations. One declaration on the VISIS plus 10 and IGF, and the other on the ICANN and human rights. And I think that I really recommend the people in this room to look into those declarations. They will be available on the Council of Europe website, and also we will try to bring some media coverage to this. And if you look at those papers, those declarations, you actually see that governments agree to many things. Governments agree, all the 47 governments agree to multi-stakeholder model. All the governments agree to follow the European Convention on Human Rights, and all human rights, freedom of expression, right to privacy, and so on. And all the governments agree to open, free, and one internet. Council of Europe has done that work for many years, but now all those important events taking place this year, I think that this is for the citizens, for the non-governmental organizations, for the civil society organizations, a place where they can actually hold their governments responsible, and I recommend to use this as a tool for participation. Then the other thing that I wanted to mention is that I'm sure you have heard about Estonia. I mean, we do many things on internet. We do banking. I think 99% of our banking is on internet. We do internet voting. 1/3 of our population votes on the internet. And now we have introduced this e-residency concept, which I, by the way, also recently introduced to my colleagues in Strasbourg. And I think it's very, very paradoxic that if you would ask an average Estonian on the street, or even people who uses internet 5-6 hours a day, what is internet governance? Or what to you matters? What are the principles that guide you in doing all the things you do on internet? I think most of the people would have difficulties to give answers to you. But if you would tell them that you would not have internet for 2 hours or 3 hours, I think this would cause an uproar. So I think that for me, maybe even more, of course, this discussion is very important, but maybe for me, even more important is that we raise the awareness of the rights that the European citizens have. And to me, they are very clearly stated in the case of the EU in the Charter of Fundamental Rights. And then, of course, in the broader context, 47 Council of Europe states in the European Convention on Human Rights.
Thank you. And thank you also for the overview of the Council of Europe work on internet governance. I was planning to ask Lee about that, but you did his job, so that was good. I'm going back to the audience with some questions for you. We've looked into the ecosystem. We have these organizations and these processes. We have these people here. But let's look at us. Do we participate? If we do, why? For example, why do we go to an IGF meeting? Why do we want to create a national IGF initiative? Why do we participate in an ICANN meeting? Why do we apply for an ISOC fellowship for the capacity building programs they are using? Why do we want to read the Council of Europe statement on internet governance? There are some people here who do participate in internet governance, so I will ask you, why do you participate? And please raise your hand, because otherwise I am coming again. And as I'm next to Vlada, please, Vlada.
Thank you, Sorina. And well, maybe linking on what Markus said. So I think I haven't missed a single IGF thus far. I missed one Eurodig, which is insane. But apart from beautiful places where the United Nations generally plays the events, one thing that is basically what Markus, you mentioned, the merit that for the first time I practically was able to apply a single thing that was a result in a way of the IGF, which was the best practices forum on building up the certs. Now, if I was not participating at the IGFs, I wouldn't know that there is such kind of a document which is built up based on a practice of different certs and different people, experts around the world, and I wouldn't know that this is something I can actually use. So that's a very practical example. I've been searching for a practical example for 4 years, for my own personal reasons, and now I found it after 10 years. But besides the practical one, what I can say is that for 10 years I've heard so many different perspectives of the same problem. Say cybersecurity, that's maybe one of my kind of focus points or focus topics. So many different angles, not only different components like cybercrime, child safety, critical infrastructure protection, whatever, cyber attacks and stuff, but also different perspectives in sense of what the law enforcement thinks about it, what the government official thinks about it, what the technical community thinks about it, what the academic community thinks about all of that, and then from different parts of the world or Europe. So for me, this kind of networking and learning was the biggest benefit of Eurodigs and IGF. And as I said, now I see also the practical example, so I hope this will continue.
Thank you, Vlada, for the icebreaker. Someone else wants to intervene? Do I see hands? I don't see hands, so I'm going to Anna.
Huh?
Why do you participate in Eurodig?
Okay. Sorry, need to gather my thoughts. Why I'm participating in Eurodig?
IG meetings.
Okay, so I think I gotta say first of all that I am already graduated lawyer this month, and think it's a very interesting sphere for me, this internet, and not from the technical side but from the governance side. And I faced many issues in telecommunication sphere back in Georgia, where there is no regulation, no one has a clue how things should be done legally. So I think from why I am participating is that, to tell, hey, I'm a lawyer, I don't know where I'll be in 10 years, but if I will be, for example, in Parliament, but I say, okay, this is legal in telecommunication, in internet sphere, this is not legal. So, and from now, I think as a young participant, I think it's very interesting every time I come here to share my thoughts and say, hey, I've been born with the internet and this is really natural, this is not natural, and listen to me and maybe you take my recommendation. So I think that's it. Okay, a little bit lost.
No, that was good, Anna. Thank you. Lee, do you want to say something?
Just very quickly to say that there are over 30 regional and sub-regional, I think Markus, correct me if I'm wrong, IGFs across the world, and there's over 20 national, and also the EuroDig in the pan-European region. So something is happening. I mean, you know, EuroDig started in 2008 with, I think, 80, 100 people. This year we have 500 registrations. Last year in Berlin it was 700 plus. I imagine that in Brussels next year it will also be even more. So something is happening. It's undeniable that there's an interest, there's a curiosity, there's a buy-in. The question of stake is more and more the case. So people feel they have more of a say in this. And you know, if the internet is an oxygen, or if it's a shared space which belongs to you, then it's becoming more and more interesting. So I think it's a hot topic. It's a priority for many ministries of foreign affairs in many countries across Europe, for sure, because of the need to understand their roles, I imagine. So it's undeniable. I think the question of gaps as well is appearing. Where there are things happening, there are also gaps in things not being done. It was what the girl said, and I think the gaps are quite deafening too. You know, who fills that gap? Whose role is it? And so people start looking at each other. So whose job is it to lead? And that's a good question too. I think the gaps are also something to think about.
And this takes me to the challenges, because I've seen some of you participating, but still, when I asked the question of how many of you are newcomers, I saw quite a lot of hands. So I would look at you as newcomers, and let's look a bit into the challenges and maybe barriers to participation. Why don't we participate? Is there a lack of awareness, a lack of interest? Maybe we have more important issues. Belma?
Yeah, I'm sorry for taking. No, do you wanna talk?
Hello, my name is Sovanes, ISOC Armenia. I think with one of the questions can be the content in national language. So I think that it is important to have internet-related content in like in Armenian, in Russian, because a lot of topics on this is in English. I think that having in national language will increase awareness. Thank you.
Can I just have a very quick reaction, Sorina, on this one? What we haven't really discussed is that in parallel to national IGFs, what we're starting to see happen more and more is the creation of multi-stakeholder bodies at national level. Basically bringing the community together to discuss internet policies, internet issues, and ideally make recommendations. Some of them, these recommendations become law. For instance, in Brazil, there's a multi-stakeholder body called CGI.br, and actually last year they had developed a policy which became law. It was called the Marco Civil. The reason I mention it now is that one of the 3 key missions of CGI.br in Brazil is actually to develop local content in Portuguese. So that's one thing you can think about. As we continue these discussions, it might evolve towards creation of multi-stakeholder bodies at sub-regional level or national. And one of the tasks of the communities can be to try and encourage the creation of local content, practically.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, just a quick comment on this. In regards to Bosnia and Herzegovina, I just feel that people do not perceive, regardless of which actor in this model they represent, I don't feel that they feel the space as their own. And that's why we always, some are always more equal than the others. So general people are like, it's internet, it's this gigantic space. We are the users, but we are not aware of the different power that we might have as different actors. So I don't think that it is changing. I would agree with that. It's absolutely changing. For example, this year, we have a lot more events. We have a lot, you can see the conversation about internet that something is going on. But I feel that still people are not aware that internet is their space too.
Thank you, Belma. So we would have lack of awareness maybe. Jovanes talked about lack of local content. I know ICANN is doing a great work on translating most of their materials, so that should be some credit to ICANN for that. So for the technical things, you can go on the ICANN website and see some material in some other languages than English. Do we have some other challenges when it comes to participation?
Hello. As a newcomer, I might be off the point, but I wonder, is Facebook and Google present as corporation on this event or on event tomorrow? Because for more and more users, internet equals Facebook or internet equals Google. So if we are not regulating them, what do we regulate, and how is it relevant for average user of internet?
I don't know if Facebook or Google are around.
There will be later on in the week. There's at least one Google representative on one of the panels, I think tomorrow, Ross, who's their human rights person. For Facebook, I imagine some of them will be around. They are certainly involved in these discussions in internet governance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Someone else in the room, what do we need to do to overcome these challenges? Again, we've heard about lack of awareness, maybe lack of interest. How do we build the capacity of stakeholders and how to encourage them to participate? Do we have some input from the room, or do I go back to the key participants? Okay, the IGF, they have a fellowship program at the Secretariat. They are also trying to bring people at the meetings. ISOC has a capacity building initiative, an e-learning platform working with Diplo on that. The IGF, the ICANN has the fellowship program. Council of Europe is also supporting participants in this particular meeting also. So you are all doing capacity building things. Can you explain a bit why you do that? Jean-Jacques, please.
I thought people in the room had raised it, and you had. There's, I think, a lack of awareness, and yet the internet is with us every day. And it does raise questions, I think, for anyone in the street on all sorts of issues. And privacy, in Europe, certainly is one of the hot debates at the moment, just to mention one. And so I think we need to raise awareness because precisely, actually, we have a system for a lot of what happens in internet governance where people can have their say and participate. But like for any process, you need to be educated to understand how it works. If you look at, for instance, any parliament, any legislation, any legal framework, you can't just come in and change it. You have to understand how it works. And our job is to explain how it works so that when you do come and participate, you can have as much impact as you can.
I will again speak on behalf of Lee, because if he starts, he will not stop. So I just would like to say that actually Council of Europe is doing indeed a lot of work, and actually many of the things Council of Europe does in the cooperation with the European Union, who finances most of that work, and actually there are action plans which of course cover a whole range of human rights issues, and more the issues related to human rights and internet governance are included there. So I think that if I could emphasize this here because I see that this is a very big and very group of very various people and various stakeholders represented, then just to push your government to that direction that they should include, because the Council of Europe action plans with member states are negotiated between the government and the Council of Europe, so that civil society would push their governments to that direction, that more and more those issues would be covered in those action plans. And I think that the diplomats in Strasbourg would also find it easier to push that through. Thank you.
Thank you. Frédéric, you wanted to?
Yeah, thank you, Sorina. So first, I'm very happy to say that in this SEEDIG we have here the persons leading our program, and this is Toral Cowison. So Toral, if you are in the room, please stand up and wave your hand. I want people to see you, because Toral is the head of the ILP in our organization. And to answer your questions, but Toral might just say much more about this, we truly believe that and we call them ambassadors, by the way. We truly believe in a decentralized way. So we invite, through fellowship, people. We trust that when they get back to their own country, they can speak and spread the words about their experience in the IGF or within the IETF, as I mentioned. So it's truly important for us. This is a distributed way. We try really to have a very balanced ambassador. Sorina, you can witness, you were one of the esteemed and distinguished ambassadors in the past. You still are, by the way, because once you be an ambassador of ISOC, you stay an ambassador for ISOC. But Toral, if you want to add something, or at least I would like people to see Toral, and if you have questions, please see with her.
Thank you. I think Frédéric actually said it very well. So I am here. I'm here for the next few days. So if you'd like to talk about any of our programs, including the Ambassadors Program, we also run a fellowship to the IETF as well. And Sorina, you mentioned the online platform as well. So we have classes that we offer to support capacity building. Thank you.
Just one thing. I think that in terms of what are the next steps, what to do next, I think it's quite simple. I think you need to look at where the power is in your country, and then start talking about internet governance with that power. It's pretty straightforward. There's a lot of documents that are being agreed to, which they are signing up to. It's a question of sensitizing them about this and saying this is a shared approach to I have a voice, and this needs to be shaped in this way, according to what we've agreed in general. So I think even where there are top-down, issues of power and who decides on what, internet governance is about sensitizing and raising awareness that it's a shared responsibility. Maybe they don't know that. Maybe we need to do more in that respect.
Thank you, Lee. And because we need to finalize this session, I would like to ask all of you, the key participants, to briefly say, because Lee talked about that, the way forward. How do you see the way forward when it comes to more participation and more engagement? Markus, maybe I can start with you. Thank you.
Well, do more of the same, but even more so. I think this is a very good initiative here, and it shows people engage in debate. And if we want to shape the future of the internet together, we have to reach out, we have to raise awareness. We want to do that with informed citizens. And now we have a generation of digital natives who are citizens, so make sure they shape the future of the internet.
Thank you. Lee?
More capacity building on the ground in countries with stakeholders like judges and lawyers and prosecutors, not just the stakeholders we're talking about here. If we sensitize them, I think then we're on the good road.
Thank you. Frédéric?
Don't take the internet as granted. So it's a very important notion. The internet is user-centric, so users have a big stake. So local engagement is key. So join ISOC. I mean, it's easy. 2 clicks and you become a member. We have 117 chapters in the world, so it should be easy to find us. Thank you.
Thank you. Jean-Jacques?
I would just again say, try and get engaged. Use today to make contacts, to discuss. At ICANN, we don't even have a membership. You can just come. It's open to anyone. You just register online for the meeting and it's free. You just turn up. But as a practical follow-up to today, we have a mailing list for SEEDIG. I would just encourage you to just join a mailing list, and on the mailing list we discuss future events, what are key topics. We can help put together capacity building programs, training sessions, workshops in the region, and that are tailored to what is of interest to you, what is important to you, so we can indeed move forward and shape the internet together.
Thank you.
Just very shortly, reach out the region, country, and when possible, issue specifically.
Thank you. Do we have some final input from the room, or do I ask our rapporteur to just come up and present the short messages of the session? Oksana? As you know, for EuroDig, all workshops finalize with some key messages resulting from the session. So we have taken that model, and Oksana is going to try to present some key messages resulting from this session. And after each of them, we will ask you to either endorse or disagree with the message. So, Oksana?
Thank you. The first sentence is, it's very difficult to translate internet governance into local languages.
Do we have agreement with this? Some clapping maybe, or some show of hands? We don't have agreement? Oksana, maybe you can read that again.
Governance is associated with wrong understanding of internet governance as governmental process and regulations.
Okay, maybe we didn't explain this very well. These messages, they will be the key messages of this session. They will go into Eurodig, they will go into IGF. So we need to convey to these processes what we have discussed here today. And we can only do that if basically there is some consensus in the room. So I will ask Oksana to start again with the first message and to ask you to show your hand if you disagree with that message.
It is very difficult to translate internet governance into local languages. Disagree?
I want a show of hands if you disagree.
We should do more to translate.
So can you edit that?
Okay.
Thank you.
We have... Sorry.
So we will edit this. You don't have to do it now. The next one.
Governance is associated with wrong understanding of internet governance as governmental process and regulations.
Disagreement? I'm asking for the disagreement.
One disagreement.
I see a hand, I don't know. So go ahead, Oksana.
Governance is abstract for region.
Is abstract for the region?
For the region.
Is it abstract for us? Do you agree or you disagree? Disagree. So it's not abstract.
Okay.
We can do more to explain internet governance for the region.
It would be the first sentence, so we delete governance is abstract for region. Internet governance has to be understood as a process of dialogue, maybe by parts because it's a very long sentence. Internet governance has to be understood as a process of dialogue.
You can maybe go ahead and read the...
collective efforts of understanding of different interests
So
and
dialogue,
learning to work together
cooperation
to create internet governance ecosystem in purpose to ensure open, global, reliable, trusted internet shaped by a multi-stakeholder community.
This is a bit difficult to digest, so I'll try to summarize. Dialogue and cooperation, internet governance, and paying attention to all stakeholders, basically.
Okay. To understand principles of internet governance, it is useful to discuss multi-stakeholder model, bottom-up approach, openness, inclusiveness, collaboration, self-regulation, roles and responsibilities from the point of view of each stakeholder, gender, age, linguistic group, and issue. I would like to add from the very last discussion. Transparency, linking technology and policy, setting the rules for governance.
A lot of principles there.
It's not about principles, it's about how we have to discuss them.
Any reaction from the room? Okay, Oksana, can we go into the challenges, the final part of the session?
To be involved in global internet governance process, it's necessary to learn to have a stake and to have a say. Ensure that everybody has to be at the same level, but within their own roles and responsibilities.
Okay.
To create financial basis for this involvement. Council of Europe guidelines for internet users' rights.
That's fine. Let's not go into specificities because then we will have to...
and it's about the mechanism, how to involve.
It's fine.
It's enough? Oh. Okay.
We will try to somehow summarize this into shorter messages and we will make sure we present them to all of you before the end of today. And thank you so much for our key participants. Thank you to all for being so active. Yeah, coffee break, of course. Thank you for translation. We start in some 25 minutes, the next session.
Well done. Great job. Great job. Well done.
Sorry, in Vitosha room, there is a coffee, so